Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. I don't think we need any more. If you listen to this next bit, it might help. I wish to make one further point. There are many reflections on Sir David Amess's decency and kindness at a very moving Requiem Mass held yesterday. I sincerely hope that those qualities of kindness, decency, are reflected in our proceedings today and in the future. I now call the Prime Minister. Chris Bryant, number one.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with... Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. Thank you. Thank you very much. Immediately following PMQs, I will attend the Welcome Home march-in to thank all those involved in pitting our evacuation from Kabul. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Chris Bryant.
I too will be attending I too will be attending in a few minutes. Nicky's 7-year-old son had 37 seizures a day because of a brain disease he suffered from. He's had surgery now, but it's a struggle every day to get him to stay in school. Nicky, is supporting the acquired brain injury bill because she believes that the government needs to have a cross-departmental strategy for supporting those who've had an acquired brain injury, whether that's rugby players with concussion and dementia, it's women who've been beaten in the head by their partners, it's people who've had brain injuries due to children who've had suffered from carbon monoxide poisoning, soldiers who've been in explosions. I really hope that the government is going to back the acquired brain injury bill. But above all, we need a strategy to help the 1.4 million people in this country. Will he give us that?
Prime Minister.
I want to thank the Right Honourable Member for raising this vital issue and for his commitment to this cause, his personal commitment. And I can assure him that we are studying his proposed bill and working to ensure that people do get the support for the acquired brain injuries that they have received. And what we can certainly pledge at this stage to do, and I hope this will be of some use to him and the many who care about this issue in the way that he does, and as I'm sure members do across the House, the Department of Health and Social Care will lead on the development of a cross-departmental government strategy on acquired brain injury and other neurological conditions. I'll be very happy to share details with him shortly.
Felicity Bucket.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In July of this year, my constituency, Kensington, suffered devastating flooding, with more than 2,000 homes flooded, a river running down Portobello Road, and a lot of residents having to move into temporary accommodation. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that Thames Water needs to come up with short and long-term solutions, and they need to make sufficient investment in infrastructure to prevent events like this happening again?
Yes.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise flooding, Mr. Speaker, and she's right about short and long-term solutions, and that's why I'm proud, amongst other things, to have helped instigate the Thames Tideway Tunnel, with the biggest super sewer in the history of this country, which will help to deal with what happens in London when the Basingstoke interceptors overflow, and to deal with flooding throughout the city.
Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the last election, the Prime Minister promised that nobody would have to sell their home to pay for care. That's another broken promise, isn't it?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker. No, Mr. Speaker. Because if he looked at what we are proposing, and if he supported what we are proposing, which is fixing something that Labour never fixed in all their years in office, Mr. Speaker, We are saying to the people of this country that we will disregard your home as part of your assets if you and your spouse are living in it. And number two, Mr. Speaker, you can have a deferred payments agreement if you move out of it and you're living in residential care. You can have a deferred payments agreement. But most important of all, Mr. Speaker, by putting the huge investment that we are making now in health and social care, and we are allowing for the first time the people of this country to insure themselves against the potentially catastrophic, the otherwise catastrophic costs of dementia or Alzheimer's, Mr. Speaker. And even if you're not one of those people who suffer from those afflictions, we are taking away the anxiety from millions of people up and down the land about their homes.
Keir Starmer.
I think the Prime Minister just described the broken system he said he was fixing. So it's certainly not a straight answer. Let's have another go. Let's have another go. I see they turned up this week, Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, he used to say that...
Sorry. I don't think I need any further. Yesterday we had a very good example of the house being at its best in that church, in that cathedral. Please, let's show some respect. I want to be able to hear not only the Prime Minister but the Leader of the Opposition. Shouting each other down doesn't do you or your constituents any good. We need to hear the questions, and I certainly need to hear the answers. And if anybody doesn't like it, please leave now. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, it's not a complicated question, so let's have another go. He used to say that nobody would have to sell their home to pay for their care. It's in his manifesto right here. On the basis of that promise, he then put up tax on every working person in the country. So has he done what he promised and ensured that nobody will have to sell their home to pay for care? Yes or no? It's not complicated.
Prime Minister.
No, it's not complicated, Mr. Speaker, because what we're doing is disregarding your home as part of the assets that we calculate. So if you go down to £100,000, that's the beginning where we will ask you to contribute. But your home is not included in that, Mr. Speaker. And they have absolutely no plan. They've spent decades failing to address this. And only a few weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, they failed to vote for the £36 billion that will enable us to fix this and to help people up and down the country, not just to fix the social care problem, but to pay for people to live in their own homes, Mr. Speaker, and receive the care they need in their homes. That's what this One Nation Conservative government is doing. Why won't he support it?
Mr. Speaker has had two opportunities to stand by his manifesto commitment and he's not taken them. Well, it says he just has. So let's test this in the real world, Prime Minister. Under the Prime Minister's plans, a person with assets worth about £100,000, most of it turned up in their home, would have to pay £80,000. They'd lose almost everything. How on earth does the Prime Minister think that they can get their hands on that kind of money without selling their home?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to have a third go at trying to clear this up in the befuddled mind of the right honourable gentleman opposite, because it is important, and the fact is that the party opposite have totally failed to address it. They haven't had the guts to fix this in all their time in office. It's something left over. It's something left over from the Attlee government, and we are fixing it. And let me repeat for the third time, Mr. Speaker, since your home is disregarded. Number two, even if you have a second home in your residential care, Mr. Speaker, you have a deferred payments agreement if you want. And number three, Mr. Speaker, we are allowing you to insure yourself for the first time against the catastrophic consequence by capping it at 86,000, Mr. Speaker. And now he stood on a manifesto to put the cap where, Mr. Speaker? At £100,000, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
The question was very simple, and it's the question all of his backbenchers answered. If you've got a house worth about £120,000, £140,000, how do you find £80,000+ without selling your home? It's common sense. Strip away the bluster, strip away the deflection, strip away the refusal to answer the question. There's a simple truth, and this is why the Prime Minister won't address it. People will still be forced to sell their homes to pay for care. That accounts... Why did they... Look at the vote the other day to see the answer to that question. They'll still be forced to sell their home. It's another broken promise. Just like he promised that he wouldn't put up tax. Just like he promised 40 new hospitals. Just like he promised a rail revolution in the north. Mr. Speaker, who knows if he'll make it to the next election? But if he does, how does he expect anyone to take him and his promises seriously?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yet again he raises the rail revolution in the north. And the 3 new high-speed lines, Mr. Speaker, 96 billion pounds. Nothing like it. Again, nothing like it, Mr. Speaker. Nothing like it for a century. And just for the advantage of what I didn't even know this. I was in a state of complete innocence about this last week, Mr. Speaker. But it turns out that the right honourable gentleman actually campaigned against HS2 altogether. Said it would be devastating and said it should be cancelled. I can tell you something, Mr. Speaker. HS2 runs through my constituency as well. And I took a decision, even though it's been very tough for my constituents, I took a decision that it was the right thing to do for the long-term interests of the whole country. How can they possibly trust that man?
Mr. Speaker, I think he's lost his place in his notes again. The only thing he's delivering is high taxes, high prices and low growth. I'm not sure the Prime Minister should be shouting about that. And it isn't just broken promises, it's also about fairness. Everyone needs protection against massive health and care costs. But under his plans, someone with assets worth about £100,000 will lose almost everything. Yet somebody with assets of about £1 million will keep almost everything. It's just like their 2017 manifesto all over again. Only this time, something has changed. He's picked the pockets of working people to protect the estates of the wealthiest. How could he possibly have managed to devise a working-class dementia tax?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've answered that question 3 times already. This does more for working people up and down the country than Labour ever did. Because we're actually solving the problem that they failed to address. We're disregarding your housing asset altogether, Mr. Speaker, while you're in it. And he talks about jobs, he talks about working people. Well, let me just remind him. There's just one key statistic that people should bear in mind. It's now almost a month after furlough ended. He talks about the economy, Mr. Speaker. There are now more people in work than there were before the pandemic began. And that's because of the policies this government has pursued.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, there's no getting away from it. Working people are being asked to pay twice. During their working lives, they'll pay much more tax in national insurance, whilst those living off wealth are protected. And then when they retire, Mr. Speaker, they face having to sell their home when the wealthiest won't have to do so. It's a classic con game, a Covent Garden pickpocketing operation. The Prime Minister's the front man, distracting people with wild promises and panto speeches, whilst his Chancellor dips his hand in their pocket. But now the Prime Minister's routine is falling flat. His Chancellor is worried that people are getting wise. His backbenchers say it's embarrassing. Your words. Your words. And senior people in Downing Street tell the BBC it's just not working. Is everything okay, Prime Minister?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I tell you what's not working. It's that line of attack. Because I just want to repeat. I want to repeat the crucial point, Mr. Speaker. We're delivering for the working people of this country. We're delivering for the people of this country, and we're fixing the problems that they thought could never be fixed. We're doing the things that they thought were impossible. And let me repeat: there are now more people in work in this country, jobs up, with their wages going up, Mr. Speaker, than there were before the pandemic began. And that is because of the policies that this government has followed. Whether it's on rolling out the vaccine, if you remember, that he opposed, whether it's on investment that he opposed. He did, Mr. Speaker. He didn't want to invest in the vaccine task force. I seem to remember. Or whether it is making the strategic investments that we have. If we listened to Captain Hindsight, Mr. Speaker, we would have no HS2 at all, because that was what he stood for. And if we listened to him, we would all still be in lockdown, Mr. Speaker.